I'm Laura Donahue, for those of you that I haven't had a chance to meet. I'm the Senior Director of Advocacy and Network at Best Friends Animal Society.
I'm Tabitha Treloar. I'm the Director of Communications at the Richmond SPCA. The states where I've advocated is exclusively Virginia, but I've also lived in Mississippi and Tennessee, and Laura has experience in more states with legislation and advocacy.
Yep, I worked in human services the first part of my career, and I've actually worked inside Capitol and outside, mostly outside, but I did start working for a Baltimore City delegate and also a United States Senator, so I've been sort of on both sides of the desk, inside and outside a building. I started in animal welfare and animal advocacy, actually working for a farm animal ballot initiative. And since then, I have worked for 501c3s and C4s engaging in animal advocacy around half a dozen states. Currently reside in Texas, so I'm very familiar with the Texas Capitol. However, got to know Tabitha when I was the Virginia State Director for HSUS. And in my spare time, we formed a political action committee called Humane Dominion. First pack for animals in Virginia, and since then, I've also started a political action committee and tandem C3, C4 in Texas. So there's almost no question that I don't welcome or want to chat about around advocacy for animals.
Mm-hmm. And Laura and I worked together first on local ordinances at the state level. We worked on an omnibus animal fighting bill. And eventually also on some local ordinances, also in the Richmond City Council. So it's nice to be together again.
Yes. So today we're hoping you leave with the essential building blocks for how to be effective in talking about policy. Whether or not you consider yourself an advocate, your voice is so important to inform programmatic and policy decisions that affect the lives of the animals in your shelter, in your rescue, in your care. And so you will leave today feeling confident and competent at the basic building blocks. And of course, we are both available to talk afterwards and at any time.
So now that you've gotten to know us, we'd like to know a little bit more about you and specifically the conditioning that you've arrived with today. And what does that mean? Who's familiar with classical conditioning? Great. So I'm very fortunate to work with a wonderful animal behaviorist, Sarah Babcock, at the Richmond SPCA. And she keeps me really apprised on those building blocks of classical conditioning that otherwise, we might tend to forget before, since we haven't seen those since maybe an early psych class. But Sarah tells me that in classical conditioning, there are two strategies to reverse habituation. So habituation is the response that has been built through classical conditioning. Well, I'm going to go back. Sorry. So I'm trying to find my notes, but we're not going to. You can have, let me try getting the mouse. A little classic. Well, we're not going to get to that. Okay. I don't know. Can you get the mouse? Mm-mm. No, that's okay. No, that's okay. So you can have habituation. Oh.
Just trying to see if I can help.
You're trying to help. I'm just trying to get the little swirly thing. Oh,
It was
thank
on
you.
the other screen.
No worries, no worries. Thank you so much. Okay, so your strategies for reversing habituation are to create a break in time before reintroducing the stimulus. Often you'll have spontaneous recovery. The other is to change the stimulus and present it differently. So if you're thinking about dog training, you're thinking about a stimulus like a doorbell. You're thinking about dishabituating that. And how does this apply? Why is this relevant? Well, if you've been reluctant to engage, our goal today is that this presentation is going to reframe how you look at public policy. It's going to give you a break while you're here at Best Friends in a different setting Did I just, we're fine. While attending the Best Friends National Conference, providing an opportunity where you recover, you prepare to engage anew when you return to your community. But first, we've got a couple of questions, so let's get to know you a little bit. Can we? No. Can IT help us start the Minty? Pardon?
It looks like it disappeared.
The Minty integration. We may have a little technical, okay, so we were gonna do this through an app, but we can just ask and maybe let you give us a little bit of.
I don't know if this was actually preloaded on here.
Okay.
That would be something we had to.
That's fine. Yeah, we should have rehearsed this. Sorry guys. What we really want to know, though, is what type of organization you represent. Can all of our government orgs give us a hand? Awesome. And private nonprofits? And private nonprofit, but with a government contract. Here we go. And any other? Anybody we didn't cover in there? Okay.
Well, now the clicker's not working.
Yes. Okay, so this prompt, if we were able to use the app, unfortunately. So on a scale of 1, not at all involved, to 5, highly involved, how active would you say your organization is in policy decisions or discussions related to animal welfare? Yeah, let's give us hands of numbers.
So, oh yeah.
Yeah.
Put 1 to 5 on your hand.
The 1 to 5 up. I'm seeing a couple of 5s. I'm seeing some 1s. Anybody in between? I've got a 4, and some 3s. Okay, all right.
Nice mix.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so our last question is what are the roadblocks that you have put up for engaging in policy? The things that have limited your engagement with public process.
Don't want to isolate donors, it was one. Go ahead.
So we are a brand new 501c3, my friend and I, and we don't even really know where to start or what to do. We've just been through all of the commissioners nonstop. We live in West Palm, Donahue, West Palm area, and we just don't know who's above them, what to do. So, but once we know.
Great. Well, you're
We're going to try to
room.
repeat for the mic, but let's also ask. Let's ask if everybody can go to the mic. So we'll rephrase that. So a brand new 501c3, just formed in West Palm, and not really sure where to start. Yeah. Can we get anybody to go to the mic to kind of share
or
your?
I can yell it. I mean, I can repeat it.
I'm very loud, so more roadblocks were put in front of us. We're in Chicago, and we had a diversion program for our animal control, but we also, because we're the squeaky wheel about, the political landscape and the city's policies, we were kicked out from our shelf diversion program because we were too squeaky and they didn't want to hear from us about policies. So.
Well, we are going to help you. It is important to be squeaky. Just the right amount of squeakiness, maybe. So some concerns about maybe overdoing it a bit and how to finesse and refine so that you can be an effective messenger and still very active. Anyone else? Time. Isn't that so true? Time. And
You're in
there-
the trenches too. You're in the trenches with the day-to-day, and so making the time for the engagement.
And often policy is prevention. So it's working upstream and it's getting in front of the crisis, right? When animals enter our care, It's definitely at the bottom of the stream, right? They've come into our care because a crisis has occurred, either in their owner's life or in their life, right? And so programs and policies try to get in front of that, but it's finding the time to do it. I definitely hear that as being a challenge or roadblock.
Recently, my name is Carrie from National Rescue in New Jersey. Recently, I went to the State House on just night before and was told at the State House that kindergarten class had come in and basically changed policy on one of the foods in New Jersey and had it, it's basically listed now as the cranberry is a state food for New Jersey. And I was just like blown away and embarrassed that I wouldn't have a clue how to start to do. I don't have a clue. And that's why I'm in this room today. And there was this kindergarten class down at Donahue.
Wonderful.
So seeing others do it, seeing youth do it, but not knowing where to start. And the reason that we're repeating is because we have a video feed. So we want to make sure that this gets included in that. But that's great, yeah, that you see others making a change and you want to jump in for your community.
Okay, so if you're able, this is a fun exercise. Please stand. If not, please feel free to raise your hand. So everyone, if you would, go ahead and stand if you're able or raise your hand. Indulge me for a bit. I'm going to ask you a question, and if you know the answer, please remain standing. So everyone knows the answer to this question. Who is the President of the United States? Okay, phew, you guys scared me for a minute. Yes, exactly, great. Okay, remain standing if you know the name of your state's 2 senators in the United States Senate, not to be confused with your, and we're on the honors policy, please, no shame, thank you. Okay, so we've lost a few people. What about your district's representative in the United States House of Representatives? Okay. Now we're getting to the state legislature, not to be confused with Congress. So your representative and your state legislature could be called a General Assembly or a State Assembly. Okay. Your city mayor or your county commissioner. Oh, look at that. I didn't
We got
anticipate
some
new
popping
people.
back up.
Yes, you all are very good. That gives me hope. Thank you. The elected officials serving your local municipality or township. Okay, awesome. There are more people standing than there were last year when I did this exercise, and that makes me really happy. Okay, please take a seat. Thank you. So, as you know, everybody started standing. The room was all standing at the beginning, and we did have a few pop up when it got local, which is great. But for the most part, obviously, the closer we got to your the most local form of government where you live and operate in, the fewer people knew. And don't feel terrible about that. It's the big elections get all the coverage, right? They get all the media coverage. You can't escape it. We all know we're heading into an election season. No one can avoid that, right? It's all over. But actually, 70% of animal care, animal control, and animal services are determined through your local body, through your county, or through your city, or through your township. 70% are funded through local governments. So that is the most important government body to the operation of animal services in your community. So it's very, very important that you can blissfully sort of not be very knowledgeable about the top, but really critical to the animals, that you are very familiar with what's happening at the local government level.
So the reason that we started with your roadblocks is because we have a lot of misconceptions. And so we're going to address a lot of those today, and hopefully we'll get to even those that maybe you didn't have a chance to state for us. Starting with that engaging in any lobbying activity will endanger my nonprofit status with the IRS. So Laura, how can we recondition?
Well, first of all, the IRS has 2 different measures that can guide how much your nonprofit can engage in lobbying or political activity. And the fact that those measures are there means precisely that it is expected and anticipated that your nonprofit will engage in the policy process. Now, if you're a 501c3, you probably know that your expenditures and your income are fully tax deductible. If you are a 501c4, your income is not tax deductible, but your expenditures are. And as a C3, the IRS started, through, I think it was the Revenue Act in the 50s, started the C3 status precisely because they knew government couldn't provide for all of the services that a community needs. Taxpayer-funded government services were not going to be enough. And so the private community, the private industry, private partnerships are really going to be essential to providing a whole and complete community. But the government knew they needed to incentivize that and make it, somewhat easy since we're not making profit. And so that's why they allowed for the various income and expense tax deductible status. For a 501c4, a C4 can engage in unlimited lobbying. You don't need to track or measure your lobbying whatsoever. It also can engage in partisan activities and in electoral activities, as long as those electoral activities are not the majority of what that 501c4 is doing. So 501c4s are considered social welfare advocacy organizations. And frequently, almost every national nonprofit that you know, except for Best Friends, but this is not an unsecret wish of mine, has a 501c4. So almost any organization that you can think of, whether you might be fond of them or not. And some people might not think of the Alzheimer's Association as having a 501c4, but they do. Really, most large national 501c3s have a C4 because they want to use the full suite available in the toolbox to be able to ensure that the best programs and the best policies are created. And who creates those? Elected officials. So being a part of that process really is essential, and it is expected. And I won't get into the weeds about the insubstantial test or the expenditure. Just know that there are two measures. Most folks do the insubstantial because it just means that it's not the majority. If about 5%, the IRS doesn't actually say, but most general counsel will say, keep it under 10 or 5% of your activities that are not, lobbying, and you're fine. The expenditure test is an actual, mathematical amount that says, based on our budget, we will not expense. It's not related to activities, but we will not spend more than X amount of dollars. So, if you're working for a nonprofit, they've elected one of these two measures, and you can find out a little bit more. But again, the main takeaway here is the IRS expects you to engage in policy.
And not only does the IRS expect that nonprofits are engaging in policy, they have really clear outlines on their website. And if you're not able to get the PDF of our presentation in the conference app, you can connect with us on the conference app, and we'll make sure you get the PDF that has those links so that you can see just how clear and straightforward it is from the IRS. But they're expecting that nonprofits are engaging with the process. So your next misconception may be, if you're a government employee, we had some government shelters raise their hands. Some government employees may think they can't speak out about policy.
And again, not true. The Supreme Court has held that public employees have a First Amendment right to speak out on matters of public concern. And again, much like the organization that is in the trenches providing the services that can best inform policy and are expected to advise on those matters, if you are a government employee, you have such a unique understanding of what is working and isn't working. And when it comes to matters of public concern and how policy should be shaped, your voice is really important. Now, there are some limitations, but it's mainly around ensuring that there's no disruption in the workplace. So as an example, if you're a teacher making a public comment in a community meeting about the school board budget, completely permissible and really important, by the way, perspective. Now, if you were to speak on internal personnel disputes or grievances, you know, your employer could censor your speech on that because that would be considered disruptive. So that's sort of a basic example. But the bottom line is you can and you should speak on matters of policy relating to your very specific and important viewpoint.
Another misconception, influencing legislation is fine so long as we stay out of elections. And that really depends on that question of 501c3 or 501c4. Who feels like they have a good grasp of the 501c4? Yeah, Laura?
So first of all, as a 501c3, because if you are not a government entity, that you are probably a nonprofit and a C3, there are actually a number of activities that you can engage in around the election process. Now, you can't obviously engage in partisan matters. You can't endorse a candidate or seek in any way appear to be influencing an election, right? That's a hard no. But there are really important things that you can do. One being, you know, getting out the vote. Depending upon the state that you live in, your nonprofit or rescue could be a voter registration site. And hopefully everyone here knows that the more people participate in the electoral process, the better representatives we get and the more informed candidates we have who then go into office and get to make really important decisions. So the more people that participate in the process, the better, and your organization can play a key role in getting more people involved. Also, you know, depending upon the state, you know, helping get people to the polls, helping make sure that people are informed about the policies that they're going to be voted on is permissible. If you're a 501c4, a really cool thing that you can do is host candidate forums and publish scorecards on how these lawmakers are doing based upon the issues that you're advocating for. So if you're a C3, you probably, and you don't have a C4, you can probably find one. Most states have state animal welfare C4s. And last time I checked, more than half of the states in this country had political action committees dedicated to animal welfare. I mentioned Humane Dominion that I started in Virginia, but yeah, more than half of the states do. And they do tend to focus more on state policy, but they're there. Approach them and see if you've got a really important election in your city council or your county commissioners, they could be your voice and they could host the forum. So don't hesitate to build those coalitions. But again, depending upon your status, there are things that you can do, and absolutely everyone can and should help get more people involved in the process.
So our next misconception, taking a strong position could risk alienating our donors. And I think I heard that during our initial talk about this. It's important to remember that your supporters recognize your expertise and they look to you to lead. Some of the photos that are shown here are from the Virginia General Assembly, and they really demonstrate how animal protection is nonpartisan. So the first picture, they're both holding a beagle who was rescued from the Envigo laboratory breeding program. And so you have Senators Jennifer Boysko and Senator Jennifer McClellan, both Democrats. And actually, Senator McClellan is now our congresswoman in Virginia for my district. And Jennifer Boysko is from the northern part of the state, whereas Senator Bill Stanley is a Republican from a deep red and rural part of the Commonwealth. Boysko and Stanley were co-patrons on 3 bills to put more regulations in place on breeding of dogs and cats for laboratory purposes. These bills both passed both chambers of the split control Virginia General Assembly with actually no opposition. I don't think that that's ever happened before because animal protection is nonpartisan. But it's important to tailor your message to your community, not only to your community, but to your legislator as well, to your audience. And so you best know kind of how your supporters lean and what message is going to resonate with them. And it's also important to speak out about good and bad bills from both sides of the aisle, sometimes even from the same senator. I've actually been in front of a committee with Senator Bill Stanley where we were on the pro side talking for one of his bills, and then 2 minutes later had to stand up and say, we like the senator, we like this patron, we just don't like this particular bill, because it's about the merits of the policy that's going forward, and it's not personal. And while we're talking, though, about donors, many of your donors who are successful business people, they particularly know that being involved in the process that regulates your operation, it's a no-brainer.
Right, and if you're in the private for-profit sector, you know that all of those laws and regulations are ultimately going to affect your income, your shareholders, the success of your business. So do not be afraid to talk to your donors about communicating with elected officials regarding the laws and regulations that are going to allow for animals to live or die, that are going to make your mission successful, because they get it. They're very active in that space. Now, you don't have to get partisan, right? You don't have to talk partisan, but do not be afraid to talk to, particularly your high wealth donors, because not only do they get it and are very active because it protects their business, but they have really key relationships. They've already got those folks on their Rolodex. So, again, don't be afraid.
So you may have come with the misconception that only a group that can afford a lobbyist is going to make an impact. However, elected officials take note of the voice of their constituents. If you're a registered voter and you have registered voters among the supporters of your organization, you have a voice. And there is a precedent for grassroots efforts defeating paid lobbyists. Laura and I have both experienced that in different bills that we were advocating for, because the authentic messages really do make a greater impact and a more intense impact than automated ones. And what staffers do with every message and call is that they check that against their voter records. Not only are they looking, is this person living in my district, is this person a constituent? They can even see, they can't see how you voted, just if that assures you with privacy, but they can see, did you vote in the presidential election? Did you vote in the off-cycle election? Did you vote in each of those cycles? And so they're looking at that for every call that comes in. So if there's a lobbyist that's ginning up what we call astroturfing, which is the fake grassroots, that's all that copy and paste, but it's coming from outside the district, it's not just a raw numbers game. And it's the authenticity that really makes an impact. What the paid lobbyists do enjoy is better access, so be prepared to wait. You may be waiting for a meeting and see people go right past you, that staff welcome them right in. Those are existing relationships, and don't get frustrated by that. Keep that smile and keep waiting, because it's important that you do make that contact. But the lobbyists don't have all of the advantages, and Laura has some great research that really demonstrates this.
So elected officials all care about one thing the most, more than anything else. What do you think it is? Shout it out. Yay! That's right. A lot of people say money, and I'm like, well, that's number two. No, getting reelected, staying in power is, unless they're retiring, and those are a different breed of elected officials, and they can be kind of fun because they've got nothing to lose. But other than that, staying in power is the number one thing that elected officials care about. And all the money in the world doesn't walk into a ballot box and vote for an elected official. And there are many, many cases where, in fact, Weslaco, Texas, the new mayor, he was outspent 10-1. The incumbent mayor had won many cycles before him, and he won. And part of his platform was on animal sheltering, by the way. And so that was very cool. But again, all the money in the world, it helps, right? Because it can pay for advertising campaigns, but it can't walk into the ballot box and vote. And so, you know, to Tabitha's earlier example, astroturfing doesn't work because they care about their constituents. And they want to know if, even if it's their constituent and they're, you know, giving them a hard time and they're that squeaky wheel, if that squeaky wheel isn't voting, then they know your voice doesn't matter because you can't hold them you're not going to hold them accountable at the ballot box. So registering to vote and voting is really, really important, but making sure that you are a constituent. So this probably is a little bit hard to read from the back of the room, but this is a research survey with the Congressional Management Foundation asking lawmakers what is most influential to you. And no shock, at the top, it's constituents, constituents, constituents. And the more personal, the more influential. So going in person, they know that's a big deal. They know that you had to take off work, find out how to park, get in there. Like, you really care that much that you took that time to do that. That is incredibly impactful to them. But, you know, and then it kind of goes down from the more like personal, but still constituents. And so, again, if it's an unclear that it's a constituent, the less impactful it is. So the idea is not that letters or visits from lobbyists or emails are not effective. All of these tactics are important communication tools, but make sure that you're doing it with constituents. So I can promise you, if you get an action alert from Best Friends Animal Society, it is going to you, because when you click on that link, it's going to take you, it's going to send that message to your specific representative who represents you, as long as you have updated your address in our system. So that it will be effective. And sometimes the numbers really do matter, but again, it's about constituents. You know, the most, you know, silver-tongued, persuasive lobbyist in the world doesn't ultimately vote for that representative that he's lobbying. He might represent some money or, you know, some campaign dollars, and that's important, but again, it's, you know, it's the constituents. And so I have had many experiences where I've walked into an office and I've said, Representative, I'm telling you, your constituents really care about this issue that's going to save so many lives of shelter animals. And they've said, you know, Laura, I hear you saying that, but I've had 5 calls in support of this, and I've had 20 calls in opposition. And by the way, the more local, just as many of you sat down, the more local it got, the fewer people participate in the process. So if you visited, you know, your congressional representative and felt like a tiny fish in the pond, that's probably a very real feeling. There's a lot of messages and a lot of noise. You sit down with your city council person, go to a city council meeting. There's oftentimes maybe 7 people in the room. I mean, it's very easy to make an impact, and you do not need to flood an office. Just a handful of well-informed people that person represents can make a very big difference.
Go to the mic. Yeah, we'll take a question.
Hi, sorry. My name is Luna Lampert, and I'm with Shelter Sisters, and we are here in Florida, West Palm Beach. So we're volunteering, and we're adoption counselors at our local, it's a kill shelter. And the way we started, we've been going to a lot of the commissioners' meetings all the time. Meeting with the mayors, our local commissioner from my district, and I just don't feel that they care. It's the opposite almost. I don't feel, so that's why I'm like, okay, so what's next? Where should I go next?
Yeah.
Like, these people are useless. And I brought my husband, I brought my other friend. I'm like, support is in the numbers, and, you know, like, we're high-paying taxpayers, and, like, help us do something. You know, we have the credentials to show for, you know, like trying to show them I'm not just a crazy dog lady. Yeah. I raise 4 children and this and that, but I don't feel they care.
So I think from there, I would try to start inspiring other messengers.
Okay.
You know, that they're hearing from you, but hearing from more volume of constituents. And actually, I think that we're really on topic for this slide.
Right.
You know, feeling like the people who support your organization maybe don't have the attention span to both understand the complicated issues and communicate them to the elected officials. So let's recondition there a little bit.
Yeah.
The biggest thing, keep it simple, sweetie. That's really our approach to messaging to our constituents to help them to carry that message to their elected officials.
So not go to like the commissioners' meetings? Is that what you're saying? Like when they have the monthly commissioner meetings
No,
with
that's
the mayor and all
that's
that?
all very important. And again, it goes back to what is the thing that elected officials care about the most? Staying in power. So power is numbers, and building a coalition of individuals that are in that person's district and then communicating effectively. Listen, it's great when you can change hearts and minds, right? Hopefully that eventually happens, and that elected official would personally believes that. But frequently these elected officials, they see themselves as statesmen. They may have their own personal viewpoints, but at the end of the day, they've been elected to represent the majority of their district. So the power is in the numbers. And, again, sometimes they really do want to hear from the issue experts, and they want to hear from their constituents, but they think they have a lot of insight as well. And some may think that their constituents have bequeathed them with just making the decision, regardless of how they feel, right? So that expertise and sharing that expertise from industry experts is important. All the different tactics, you want to deploy them. But at the end of the day, a lawmaker who wants to stay in power is probably going to be influenced to vote or demonstrate interest on an issue if they believe that the majority of their constituents feel a certain way about that issue. So again, power and numbers.
Sorry, so one last question. Would you advise to keep on going and
Yes.
keep on emailing? And
Yes.
Like for example, my husband is a physician, right? So I'm figuring, okay, even though I hate thinking like that, but
Keep it up.
and I
Keep it
got
up.
a totally different reaction from the mayor with him than with me.
And they love to smoke us out on animal issues. I cannot tell you how many, hearings they put that animal issue, whether it's like a city council meeting or a state general assembly, and they hear your issue the very last, because they're frankly hoping oftentimes people leave. Animal issues, when we really rally, it brings a lot of people, and they feel more comfortable the fewer the people are in the room. So keep it up. But I think we're going to get into a lot more.
And we're going to have some more question time at the end.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're showing up at that council meeting and you're having those one-on-one meetings is the start. You've had that FaceTime with that counselor, and then you want to follow that up with your messaging to your constituents, to other voters to your network. And how do you summarize that is where we want to keep the kiss, the keep it simple, sweetie. Those short messages, making sure, let's go back just a little bit, that you start with the position. You encourage that person who's emailing or making a call to start with a clear position that you want them to take. I want you to vote yes. That usually whatever authority it is, whether it's a council or a general assembly, state legislature, is going to assign it a bill number. And that's important because that's how they're going to index it. But give it a shorthand. Give it something that resonates, that's easy to remember. For example, one of our bills in the last session that Laura and I worked on, House Bill 221. It's going to run together with all those other numbers, right? But if you remind people that that is a bill about feral cat policy, that's how they want to grasp that. And then emphasize to your constituents how little time that call or email is going to take them. Everybody has such limited time, so you really want to make it easy for them. And encourage them to send unique and personalized messages. Sometimes less is more. And so to make it easy, give them some bullet points, give them some simple points that they can break down and distill rather than a wall of text. You're probably familiar with the advocacy alerts, and it can simplify this for your constituents, but there's a cost. It can be very expensive, and it's not essential to a successful outreach campaign. But if you have friends, they can help you with that too. And we'll mention a little bit more of that. Another misconception you may have come with is that you just don't have the time to compose an effective message. These are lazy but effective tips. Start with reminding them you're a constituent. Hi, I'm Tabitha Treloar. I'm registered in District 9. This is my address where I'm registered to vote. It made me feel a little bit icky, but just saying, your bona fides. I'm a business owner, a homeowner, really establishing who you are and why you're relevant to that person. Then get to the point. Really focusing on the facts. More so, these are emotional issues to us. For us, it often is an individual animal to whom you have a real connection, or hundreds of animals whose lives are at stake, but focus on facts and data where you have them. And then, before you send that message, use your CC judiciously. If you are emailing your city council representative, find out who their liaison is if they have a separate address. If there's a chief of staff, for our state representatives, usually the whole staff is checking that inbox for that particular senator. But sometimes in your city or town council, there are some other staff members that you can copy. But I say judiciously. There are some times where it may be good to CC everybody, but most cases aren't that. And then know what not to say. And by what not to say, I'm really thinking about the thing that gets your message filed as irrelevant or too impassioned, the things that get you easily segmented into the recycle bin instead of the file that the actual delegate sees. Okay, so public testimony. It's intimidating. But let's recondition, because the most important work is not done from behind the lectern or at the podium microphone during the public testimony of the meeting. Initiating contact outside of the session or even unrelated to specific issues is not just equally important, it's far more important. It's great to invite newly elected officials to come and tour your operations, to have them visit your rescue, your humane group, your city shelter, so they know what you're doing. Many times people come to office without a connection to their shelters in their community. They likely have expertise in other areas, and so establish yourself as the source of factual information in this field as the expert. And in all of these conversations, don't be afraid to say that you don't know, but be willing to do the research and return to them with an answer. Sometimes that's the best relationship building, is just to say the simple thing. I don't know, but I'm gonna find out. Okay, so we've gotten a bill passed. Are we done? Don't sleep on the regulatory process. After a bill is passed, learn who's going to have oversight on enforcement. Is it, for example, in Virginia, shelter regulations are through the Virginia Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. Within that agency, there's a state vet's office. When we're dealing with hunting dog issues, we have the Department of Wildlife Resources. Each of these agencies have their own processes to draft and adopt regulations, and that may involve a public comment period. It might be written, it might be during a public meeting, and there are statutes related to open government and public meetings. Sometimes they're going to require you to sign up in advance to speak, but the good thing is that a lot of this is published online, and you can learn the process. You can also tell the staff in these agencies, hey, I'm new to this and I don't know where to start. And you will often find allies who are perfectly happy to walk you through what's involved. I'm all alone. So let's look at reconditioning to build some more coalitions. We're at the very end. So those coalitions are how we met.
Exactly. And it's easy to think of your coalition as being like-minded people who agree with everything you agree with and think like you, but that is not a strong coalition. I think Tabitha mentioned, elected officials don't appreciate if you have not attempted to work out differences with people who have opposing viewpoints and other organizations. You will be much more credible if, even if you had to disagree on some pieces, you did your due diligence and you really tried to meet with the other opposing viewpoints to find some consensus, to find some commonalities. Think of organizations that may be opposed in other areas, but on this you could agree. A very real example I have for you, I think you probably heard in the opening session about the repeal of the 30-year-old pit bull ban in Miami. A number of you worked really hard with us on that, and that was part of state legislation that we passed, actually, that ended BSL in government housing, and we had a little rider in there about that ban in Miami that we snuck in, and it was a hard fight, but we had an alliance that included some organizations that we regularly disagree with and are on opposite sides, including the American Dog Breeding Association and the AKC. Organizations that we frequently do not agree with and are working heavily against around the puppy mill issue. But on this, we agreed, and we were able to stand at the podium together and say, we both agree this is important policy, and that's a winning approach. So broaden your mind and try to think of building an alliance beyond just the folks that always agree with you or look like you. Yeah.
And we didn't leave as much time for questions as we had hoped, but we do still have a couple of minutes, and we're also happy to take questions afterwards. The next slide has our contact info. And come to the mic if you've got a question so that we can all hear.
Yeah, actually, I'm going to add a quick comment because I am a public administrator, retired, and I was staff when you brought that up. Most of the work is done in committees. So what I would emphasize, whether we're talking city council, where I worked at that level, or whether you're talking about the federal government, find out who's on, for example, the Animal Welfare Committee. It might not be your representative, but get to know them. And at the hearings, generally, people will come and they say, talk to the staff. Yeah, I was the one they talked to. But the work is done at the committee. By the time it gets to the full council or whatever body, the decisions have already been made. So that is my strong suggestion. One other quick thing, those of you who are in government, talk to me about the American Society for Public Administration, another one of my groups. All right, thanks.
Yeah, very, very, very true. And a number of states actually mandate certain advisory committees. In Texas, every city and county needs to have an animal advisory organization. It was mainly founded around natural disasters, but those have taken on a whole nother suite of oversight around animal shelters and policy. So it is very important to know, is there an advisory committee? If your city council or county commissioners, it's appointed, get to know your city council, and then you can be appointed onto that advisory committee, establish yourself, but those committees are very important.
As we were talking about building coalitions, one point that I wanted to make is that not only do you want the issue to be part of how you build your coalition, look at geography and look at those committee makeups, because while, for example, in Virginia, every animal welfare bill goes to an agriculture committee. I live in Richmond, an urban area, and most of the time my delegate or senator is not on that committee, but I'm very often working with other humane organizations through the Virginia Federation of Humane Societies who do have shelters in their districts. And we make sure that even though I might go to the committee for the public testimony, that the person sending the emails beforehand is somebody from that district who is sitting on those. And our time's up.
Yep, our time is up. So please don't hesitate to reach out. We're really looking forward to connecting with you more. And thanks for being here.